The first phone call anyone made about Nolan Wells that night went to his mother, 11:07 in the evening, the 4th of July. Warren Hudson, one of the friends who had been on Horn Island that day, dialed Christine Wansley. She picked up and hung up almost immediately by Hudson's account because she did not recognize the number. He called back. That second call lasted about 5 minutes, and roughly 1 minute after it ended, the same phone dialed the United States Coast Guard. That sequence now exists as something other than a teenager's memory. Screenshots of the call log from Hudson's phone have been made public, with the numbers blurred out, which matters because of the question that has hung over this case since the first week. Why did it take until 11 at night for anyone to raise an alarm? And did the friends who left that island without Nolan try to find him at all? Now that record has real limits, and this video is going to be honest about every one of them. These are screenshots from one party's phone, provided by that party to a commentator who has openly taken his side. Nothing about them has been forensically authenticated. They are not court exhibits. But here is what makes them worth your time anyway. That 11:07 timestamp does not just match Hudson's story. It matches what Nolan's own mother has told the country from the very beginning. And it matches a third account from a different friend given in a different interview on a different platform. 3 people who now agree on almost nothing agree on that minute. Before we dive into this, like this video, subscribe, and drop the location and the time you are watching from in the comments. It costs you nothing, and it tells us how far Nolan's story is actually reaching. Now, why this particular video is different from everything else being made about this case. For 3 weeks, the death of Nolan Wells has run almost entirely on memory. One group of friends says he chose to stay on that island. A young woman's family says he told her he was heading back to their boat. A mother says her son would never have let his phone leave without him. A lawyer says a voice on a video belonged to Nolan. Another young man says that voice was his own. Every one of those is an account. And accounts have a specific weakness. They cannot be checked against each other. They can only be believed or doubted, which is exactly why this case has produced 3 weeks of people shouting past one another with total confidence and no resolution. That is finally starting to change, because something else has been quietly accumulating underneath all the noise. A documentary record, not opinions. Records, things with timestamps on them, generated by machines or by professionals, most of which were created before anybody knew this case would become a national story. There is GPS tracking data from a Mississippi state agency obtained by CBS News. There is audio of a distress call. There is photograph metadata that killed one of the largest false claims in this entire case. There is a preliminary autopsy report signed by a former chief medical examiner of Washington, D.C. There is an aerial photograph of Horn Island taken that day. And now there are call logs from the night Nolan disappeared. Some of that record supports the friends. Some of it supports the family. One piece of it supports nobody and unsettles everyone. And there is a practical reason to care about the difference, beyond simply wanting the truth. When this case reaches a grand jury, and the Jackson County District Attorney has committed to presenting it once the sheriff's investigation is complete, that room is not going to weigh competing memories the way a comment section does. Prosecutors build cases on the things that can be authenticated. Timestamps, logs, extractions, reports. Testimony gets tested against records, not the other way around. Which means the inventory you are about to hear is much closer to the actual shape of this case than anything anyone has said into a microphone. So this video is an inventory. Every piece of documentary evidence that currently exists in the Nolan Wells case, what each one genuinely establishes, how it was obtained, and where its limits are. Because 2 of these items came from people with a direct stake in the outcome, and that has to be said out loud rather than buried. And at the end of it, we deal with the one enormous thing this entire record still does not contain. One quick thing before we go further. Most dangerous people do not look dangerous. They look like good husbands, trusted co-workers, devoted fathers, loyal friends, the faces nobody thinks twice about. By the time anyone realizes something is wrong, they are looking backward at warning signs that suddenly seem obvious. Awareness almost always comes too late. That is exactly why I wrote my book, How to Spot Dangerous People Before They Hurt You. Not to teach fear, but to teach recognition. Inside it, you will learn how criminals actually think, the warning signs they give long before they act, and the behaviors that could save your life or the life of someone you love. And right now it is absolutely free. The link is in the description. Read it before you ever need it, not after. Now, the first exhibit. Exhibit 1. The call logs. What was released is a set of screenshots taken from Warren Hudson's phone, showing his outgoing and incoming calls on the night of the 4th of July, with the phone numbers themselves blurred out so that private numbers are not published. Hudson provided them directly to the commentator who published them. Here is what they show, in order. At around 11 in the evening, a call from Hudson's phone to Christine Wansley. It connects and ends almost immediately. Hudson's explanation is that she picked up and hung up, and that he believes she did so because she did not recognize the number calling her. Then a second call minutes later. That one lasts roughly 5 minutes. That is the conversation in which, by both of their accounts, Hudson told her that Nolan had not come back with the group and asked whether she had heard from him. Then, about a minute after that call ends, a call from the same phone to the United States Coast Guard. 3 calls, 10 or 11 minutes, start to finish. Mother first, Coast Guard second. Now hold that against the accounts that already existed, because this is where it gets genuinely interesting. Christine Wansley has been telling the public about that call since the first week of this case, and her description has never wavered. Her phone rang at 7 minutes past 11 on the night of the 4th of July. What made her stomach drop, she has said, was not the words, but the screen. The name on it was one of Nolan's friends, not Nolan. His friends did not call her directly. That was the first sign that something was wrong, before a single word was spoken. Warren Hudson, in his own interview, described the same event from the other end. He said he had noticed Nolan was not around, texted several friends asking whether Nolan had ridden back with any of them, was told no by all of them, then asked another friend for Christine's number. He said he told her not to panic and that he was going to call the Coast Guard. He said he stayed on the line with the Coast Guard for roughly 20 minutes, giving a description of Nolan, what he was wearing, where they had last been, who he was with, which boat they were on, and the water conditions. And Trasiston Shepard, in a completely separate interview on the same platform, described the same window from a third position entirely. He said he was asleep, that he missed a call from Hudson at 20 past 9, and that he did not wake until a little after 11 when his brother came into his room to say Hudson was trying to reach him because they were looking for Nolan. He said he joined the conversation on a friend's phone, on speaker, because the group was together, and that Hudson told him they could not reach Nolan, and that he was getting on the phone with the Coast Guard. 4 sources: a grieving mother, 2 teenagers who have been publicly accused of killing her son, and a call log. All 4 place the same event inside the same handful of minutes. That convergence is worth understanding properly, because it does something specific. It does not prove anyone is innocent of anything. What it does is remove one of the most emotionally powerful accusations that is circulated in this case, the claim that the friends did nothing, said nothing, and left a mother to discover on her own that her son was missing. On that narrow question, the record now says otherwise. The first call went to her, and the Coast Guard call followed within about a minute of hanging up. So that is what the logs establish. Now, with equal weight, what they do not. They do not establish anything about what happened on that island. A phone log records that a call occurred, when it occurred, and how long it lasted. It cannot record what was said, what anyone knew, or what happened 7 hours earlier in the water off Horn Island. They do not resolve the delay. The boat left the island at 4:31 in the afternoon. The first call about Nolan was at 11:07 at night. That is roughly 6.5 hours in which, by the friends' own accounts, they went back to a house, ate, napped, and went to a gathering before anyone raised an alarm. That gap deserves to be sat with, rather than skipped, because it is the strongest remaining criticism of the friends' conduct, and no document erases it. Their own explanation is that they assumed Nolan had caught a ride with someone else and was asleep somewhere after a long day of drinking. Warren Hudson said exactly that, unprompted and unflatteringly, describing his honest belief at the time that Nolan had passed out on somebody's couch. Trayston Shepard's first reaction when he was finally reached was that Nolan was probably still with the young woman he had spent the day with. Those are ordinary assumptions for 18-year-olds to make about another 18-year-old on a holiday. They are also exactly the assumptions that cost 6.5 hours of daylight and calm water. Whether that constitutes anything more than youth and bad judgment is not a question a phone log can answer, and it is precisely the kind of question a grand jury applying a duty of care standard would examine. The call log confirms when the alarm was finally raised. It does nothing to explain why it took that long. And the friend's explanation is precisely the assumption Christine Wansley has said she cannot accept about her son, and they have not been authenticated. This is the part most channels covering these screenshots are skipping entirely, so let us be plain. These images came from Hudson, who is one of the most accused people in this case. They went to a commentator who has said on camera that he came to Mississippi because he believed an injustice was happening and that he had Hudson's back. Nobody independent has examined the device they came from. No forensic examiner has verified them. No investigator has confirmed them. Screenshots can be edited. That is not an accusation against anyone. It is a fact about screenshots. And it is why courts do not accept them the way they accept extractions. What makes these particular logs meaningful is not that they are proof. It is that they line up with 3 separate accounts, including one from the family. And one of the hardest things to do in this world is fabricate a record that happens to match what your opponent has been saying publicly for 3 weeks. One pause for him. It is easy to get lost in timestamps and forget there is an 18-year-old at the center of every one of them, and a family still waiting to be told how he died. So write his name in the comments plainly, with respect. Nolan Wells. Let this comment section be about a person rather than an argument. Now, Exhibit 2. And this one nobody handed to anybody. Exhibit 2 is the strongest piece of documentary evidence in this entire case, precisely because no participant had anything to do with creating it. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources tracks vessel movements on state waters. That agency was involved in this case from the first night, working the search alongside the United States Coast Guard and the National Park Service. Its tracking record for the boat at the center of this story was obtained by CBS News. Here is the day, as a machine recorded it. 9:56 in the morning. The boat leaves a private dock in Jackson County. 11:14. It arrives at Horn Island. Then several hours of nothing, which is what a holiday looks like on a tracker. 4:31 in the afternoon. The boat leaves Horn Island. Nolan Wells is not aboard. 5:52 in the evening, it travels into Fort Bayou. 6:06, back at the dock. 7:19, its position shifts to the Fort Bayou boat launch, and from there, according to the report, it leaves the water entirely and travels overland, presumably towed, to a residence in Biloxi owned by the boat's owners. Notice the word presumably in that last line. The tracker can see a vessel moving down a highway. It cannot see the truck pulling it. The report refuses to claim what its data cannot show, which is what disciplined evidence handling looks like and a useful standard to hold every other account, in this case, against. 2 things about this record deserve attention. The first is what it did to the timeline the public had been given. For weeks, the accounts relayed through attorneys and investigators had the group leaving the island at around 3 in the afternoon, right on top of the last confirmed sighting of Nolan. The tracker says 4:31. That opens roughly 90 minutes between the last time anyone confirmed seeing Nolan Wells and the moment his ride home actually pulled away. 90 minutes that no account from anyone has ever described. The second is that Warren Hudson, describing that day from memory on a talk show weeks later, said the boat left at 4:30. The log says 4:31, 1 minute apart. And the movements afterward, which spent 2 weeks being treated online as sinister, now have an explanation that fits them precisely. Hudson says that once they were towed clear and got the motor to stay trimmed, the boat's owner pulled the drain plug, a standard trick, because with the plug out and the hull up on plane at speed, standing water drains out the back as you run. He describes moving everyone's weight forward to get the boat to plane, running at around 40 miles an hour, and watching the water empty. But you cannot leave the plug out. So they stopped at Fort Bayou for one reason, to put it back in. Check that against the log. Fort Bayou at 5:52, back at the dock by 6:06. 14 minutes. That is about how long that job takes. His account does not merely coexist with the tracker, it explains the part of the tracker that people found most suspicious, using a detail too boring to be worth inventing. Two more details from that report belong on the record. It notes that the boat's owner, the owner's mother, and another person who was reportedly with Nolan that day all cooperated with Marine Resources investigators. And the department's own report ends on the 5th of July, the day the Jackson County Sheriff's Office took control of the case. Which means everything gathered since then sits in a sealed file, unreleased. Exhibit 3 is short, and it is the one that made the boat trouble undeniable. Audio of the distress call from that afternoon is now public. On it, the boat's operator can be heard asking for help, and the words are unambiguous. "Hey, we are at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We are going. We are sinking. Can you all please come?" Before that recording surfaced, the friend's explanation for leaving looked like three inconsistent stories. Judge Ashley Cole, whose son is Warren Hudson, had described a bilge pump failure in a public statement. Trassiston Shepard told ABC News the group was told the boat had to return because of an electrical issue. Other reporting relayed accounts of the boat taking on water. Three different descriptions, and for weeks that looked like people getting their story straight badly. Hudson's detailed account reconciled all three, because in his telling they are one event. The boat took on water. The water submerged the battery. A submerged battery is an electrical failure. And the bilge pump, the system whose entire job is preventing exactly this, was clogged and sitting level with the waterline, unable to clear anything. One malfunction, three true descriptions of it, and now a recording of teenagers on open water saying the word sinking. Exhibit 4 answers a question that shaped how this entire country understood the case before it understood anything else. A photograph taken from an aircraft over Horn Island on the 4th of July has been published, and what it shows is a barrier island surrounded by boats, hundreds of them along the northern shore, dozens more on the southern side, and streaks across the water in the frame that are boats coming and going. Set that against the picture most people formed in the first week. A remote island. 4 young men, one of them the only black teenager among them. A place so isolated that being left behind on it was, on its face, sinister. The photograph does not support that picture at all. Horn Island is roughly 10 to 12 miles long. It is visible from the Mississippi shore on a clear day, and on that particular holiday it was one of the busiest stretches of water on the Gulf Coast. Trassiston Shepard estimated thousands of people, with 400 to 500 in his own area alone, and said he knows of a boat that did not leave until 8 o'clock that evening. Hudson described boats lining the shore for miles. The aerial image corroborates both of them, and that changes the weight of one specific claim. The friends have said consistently that riding out with one group and back with another is completely ordinary on that coast, and that Nolan told them he had arranged a ride with someone else. In a picture of an empty island, that explanation strains. In a picture of hundreds of boats, it is simply a description of how people move around on a holiday. The honest limit. This photograph came from a pilot who has not been publicly named, published by the same commentator, and this channel cannot independently verify who took it or precisely when. What can be said is that it matches the crowd descriptions from multiple independent accounts, and that nothing about it is inconsistent with a holiday weekend on a popular Gulf island. Exhibit 5 is the smallest artifact in this case, and it did the most damage to a false story. After Nolan's body was recovered, a photograph began circulating showing him at a pool party. It spread with a devastating implication attached that it had been taken after the 4th of July, and therefore that the timeline everyone had been given was a lie. For a short and painful stretch, strangers shared it hoping it meant this story was not what it was, while his family watched that hope spread, knowing it was false. Rolling Stone settled it with the one thing that does not misremember. Image. Metadata. The photograph was taken on the 27th of June, a full week before Horn Island. It was simply uploaded to social media on the 5th of July, and that upload date is what created the confusion. Both friends have separately confirmed the same date without prompting. Hudson identified the location, said his own arm is around Nolan in the frame, and gave the 27th of June. The timestamp published from the photographer's own device gives the same date. There is a wrinkle in this correction that fairness requires. Ben Crump himself had reposted that image while the false claim was live. Pressed about it, he did not walk it back quietly. His explanation was that his team reposts circulating material to draw calls and tips from potential witnesses, and that reposting does not mean authenticating. You can judge that strategy however you like. A legal team drowning in tips chose reach over curation, and one cost was a grieving public briefly believing a false timeline. Exhibit 6 is the heaviest document in the case, and it is the only one prepared by a professional whose entire job is answering the question everyone is asking. On the 19th of July, Dr. Roger A. Mitchell Jr. signed his preliminary report on the death of Nolan Xavier Wells. Mitchell is a board-certified forensic pathologist and the former chief medical examiner for the District of Columbia. This was the second autopsy performed on Nolan's body, arranged and paid for privately because his family did not believe the first examination would be enough. His conclusion sits at the top of the report in 2 lines. Cause of death, undetermined, pending investigation. Manner of death, undetermined, pending investigation. The date of death is listed as unknown. He performed dissections the state's examination had not, looking specifically for hidden trauma, the face, the back of the head and neck, the ribs, the pelvis, the deep soft tissues, the back, the arms and legs. Across all of it he found no fractures, no deep tissue injuries, and no lacerations, with one exception. In the deep soft tissue overlying the occipital bone, at the back of the head, he found an area of red discoloration. He wrote that its cause is unclear, that there were no lacerations of the overlying skin and no fracture of the skull beneath it, and that the finding is inconclusive for injury around the time of death given the extensive decomposition. He also wrote that it was significant enough to flag for further investigation, and added a detail that matters enormously. It could not have been observed during the first autopsy, because that dissection was not performed there. CNN asked an outside forensic pathologist with no connection to this case what that finding could mean. Dr. Kendall Von Crowns, the chief medical examiner in Tarrant County, Texas, gave both possibilities without choosing between them. It could represent decompositional changes of the musculature, or it could be from blunt force injury to the back of the head and neck, both, side by side, from someone with nothing to gain. Mitchell also recorded that the anterior structures of Nolan's neck, the trachea, the laryngeal cartilage, the thyroid horn, the hyoid bone, were not received with the body. He assumed the first pathologist had retained them for further evaluation, and wrote plainly that retaining those structures is common forensic pathology practice. But he added that a posterior neck dissection performed without reviewing the anterior structures is incomplete, and that he therefore could not rule out injury to the neck. And he wrote the sentence that has traveled further than anything else in this case, that for these reasons, he cannot rule out whether any intervening, non-accidental factors contributed to or caused the death of Nolan Wells. Hear the architecture of that sentence. Because it is precise, it does not say the evidence suggests foul play. It says he cannot exclude it, for the reasons he just listed: a decomposed body, dissected organs, no lungs to examine for water, no stomach contents, no neck structures, no toxicology. A pathologist working with that much missing cannot rule out a great many things. He closed with 7 outstanding questions. What circumstances led to Nolan entering the water? What position the body was in when found? Whether there was water in the airway? Whether there is evidence of injury to the anterior neck structures? Whether there is evidence of bleeding inside the skull? What the stomach contents were? And what the toxicology shows? Count how many of those only the state of Mississippi can answer. 6 of the 7. Which brings us to the thing this entire documentary record does not contain, and it is the largest hole in this case by a wide margin. Nowhere in any of it, not the logs, not the tracker, not the audio, not the aerial photograph, not the autopsy, is there a single account of Nolan Wells after roughly 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the 4th of July. Sit with the shape of that. A young man was left on an island that an aerial photograph shows surrounded by hundreds of boats, holding, by multiple estimates, thousands of people. It was daylight. It was a holiday. And in 3 weeks, not one of those people has publicly described seeing him, speaking to him, or photographing him after that hour. The closest thing anyone has produced is a video obtained by TMZ, recorded at 23 minutes past 2 in the afternoon, showing a young black man on the back deck of a boat wearing trunks matching the color Nolan was wearing. His face is not visible. The person who filmed it felt strongly enough that it might be him to take it to the sheriff's office. One friend has said, secondhand, that he spoke to somebody who saw Nolan at 6 o'clock that evening. That claim is unnamed, uncorroborated, has not been shown to have reached investigators, and contradicts the public record as it currently stands. It would be the most important fact in this case if it held. It has not been established. So the crowd that should have made silence impossible has produced silence anyway. And that is why the sheriff's office keeps asking the public for original, unedited photographs and videos from that day, and why the family's legal team says it is receiving 50 to 100 calls a day from people who were out there. There is one more category worth covering, and it is the evidence that exists but nobody has seen. Nolan's phone is the obvious one. His family has said that when it was returned, content that should have been there was missing, and that messages had been deleted. Warren Hudson has flatly denied that anyone touched it, said it sat among several phones in a truck after the boating emergency, and said nobody in the group knew Nolan's password. Those two accounts cannot both be complete. That dispute is the only one in this entire case with a definitive answer waiting, and this is the point worth holding on to. Deleting something from a phone rarely destroys it. Data survives at multiple levels of a device that a proper forensic extraction can reach. Text messages pass through carrier networks, and platforms maintain their own server records. If messages were deleted, that is very likely provable. If nothing was deleted, that is provable too. Both sides agreed to a joint inspection, forensic experts retained by the family working alongside experts connected to the official investigation, examining the device at the same time and seeing the results at the same moment, rather than trading competing statements afterward. A Mississippi law professor called that arrangement genuinely unusual, noting that evidence is normally secured rather than shared. The FBI is assisting the sheriff's office with digital evidence in this case, and ABC reported that investigators had requested the device but had not yet received it, with the family's team saying they intend to turn it over after their own examination. As of this recording, that joint inspection has not taken place. Then there are the text messages nobody has published. The commentator who released the call logs has stated that he also possesses text messages from the young woman Nolan spent the afternoon with, and that he has deliberately chosen not to publish them until he has spoken with her directly, so that she can provide context, and so that she is treated with the same consideration as everyone else he has interviewed. Whatever anyone thinks of that platform, that particular decision is the right one, and it deserves to be reported as such, because publishing a teenage girl's private messages without her participation, in a case this inflamed, would have consequences for a person who has been accused of nothing. And the largest missing document of all, the state of Mississippi's own autopsy, performed on the 7th of July, still unreleased while toxicology testing runs. That report contains 6 of the 7 answers the independent pathologist said he needs. There is also a standing public request that functions as its own kind of evidence gathering, and it tells you something about what investigators believe is still out there. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has asked anyone who was on or near the northwest tip of Horn Island that day to submit original unedited photographs and videos. And its own written request specifically asked for footage depicting alleged altercations or believed to include Nolan Wells. Read that carefully, because both halves are true simultaneously. The same office that said early on it saw no indication of a crime is, in writing, asking the public for images of an alleged altercation involving this specific young man. Squaring those two things is the sheriff's burden, not ours. But the request also tells you the most practical fact in this entire case. Investigators believe the answer is sitting in a stranger's camera roll. And there is real money attached to that belief now. At Nolan's funeral, Reverend Al Sharpton and Tyler Perry each offered $50,000 for information leading to a conviction in his death. $100,000 outstanding for anyone who knows something. Whatever else that reward signals, it signals that the people closest to this family do not believe the full account has surfaced. There is one more document, and almost nobody has covered it, though it may end up mattering more than several of the others. On the 20th of July, the day of her son's funeral, Christine Wansley signed a petition to open Nolan's estate and to serve as its administratrix. It was filed the same day in Jackson County Chancery Court, and the petition describes the estate's assets in a way that tells you precisely what it is for, consisting solely of claims for damages resulting from the circumstances surrounding his death. In plain language, that is the procedural groundwork for a wrongful death lawsuit. An estate has to legally exist before it can sue on a deceased person's behalf. It is not a lawsuit. It names no defendant. It accuses nobody of anything. It is a legal container being built quietly while everything else plays out, and unlike almost everything else in this case, it is a public court filing rather than somebody's account. It matters because of a distinction that keeps getting lost. A grand jury weighing criminal charges asks whether there is probable cause to believe a crime occurred. A civil court asks a much lower question, whether it is more likely than not that someone's negligence contributed to a death. Conduct that never produces a criminal charge can still produce civil liability, which means the 6.5-hour delay, the decision-making on that boat, and the chain of custody on that phone may all get argued somewhere regardless of what a grand jury does. And in that courtroom, the documentary record you have just heard would not be background, it would be exhibits. So what does the full inventory actually add up to? Take the record as a whole, and it does something uncomfortable for everyone holding a firm position on the questions of what the friends did that night and why they left the island. The documentary evidence has consistently supported their account. The tracker matched Hudson's departure time to the minute and explained the movements people found suspicious. The distress audio confirmed the boat was failing. The metadata killed the pool photograph claim. The aerial image destroyed the secluded island framing. The call log shows the first call went to Nolan's mother, with the Coast Guard following about a minute later. On the question of what happened to Nolan Wells, the documentary evidence supports nobody, because it does not exist yet. The only professional document that speaks to it says undetermined, twice, and lists 7 unanswered questions. And the one piece of that record that unsettles everyone, an unexplained mark on the back of an 18-year-old's head, in a place the state's examination never looked, cuts against any comfortable conclusion in either direction. Those 2 paragraphs are both true at the same time, and holding them together is the hardest thing this case asks of anyone. A family can be right that the early handling of this investigation was unacceptable, that a sheriff should not announce no foul play within an hour of a body being recovered and before any autopsy exists, and that a mark on the back of their son's head demands an answer nobody has given them. And a group of teenagers can be telling the truth about a boat that was sinking. A departure at 4:31 and a phone call at 11:07. Neither of those requires the other to be false. The public treated this case as though it did, and that is why 2 families have spent 3 weeks being destroyed by strangers who were certain. What comes next is not another interview. It is 4 documents: toxicology, the state's autopsy, a forensic extraction of a phone. And whatever a grand jury decides to do with all of it, every one of those will exist on paper. Every one of them can be checked. And in a case that has been run almost entirely on people's word for 3 weeks, that is the only thing that is going to end it. If you subscribed at the start, keep notifications on, because when the toxicology lands, when the state's report is released, when that phone is finally examined, and when the grand jury acts, the verified breakdown will be here the day it is confirmed and not a minute before. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old, a graduate of Ocean Springs High School and a rising sophomore wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College, days away from reporting back for his season. He would have turned 19 in August. There is a call log now showing that at 7 minutes past 11 on the night of the 4th of July, somebody finally noticed he was gone. His mother had been waiting for that call without knowing it. And every document that has surfaced since, every timestamp, every recording, every photograph, every finding, exists because 2 parents refused to accept that the story ended on that island. Whatever the record eventually says, that refusal is the reason there is a record at all. Nolan Wells. Say his name, and stay with this until there is an answer.